I'm excited to show you my favorite AI stocks right now and what kind of stocks to watch over the next few years. Your time is valuable, so let's get right into it. Since there's so much hype surrounding generative AI tools like ChatGPT and what they could mean for our future, I thought I'd start this video in an unusual place, January of 2010. The latest smartphone was the iPhone 3, and the mobile internet was still in the very early innings. Artificial intelligence was a big buzzword even back then. But knowing what you know now would give you a huge advantage as an investor, since you could basically see the future. And if you looked 5 years into the future then, this is what you'd see. The rise of the mobile internet really started with the companies making the chips themselves, like Qualcomm and ARM. That's the first section of this chart. Then the iPhone 4 came out in June of 2010, which was the first iPhone with a Retina display. This was a big step up in terms of user experience for smartphones, which means a big step up in their adoption. But Apple wasn't the only huge winner for the mobile internet. In addition to making many of Apple's displays, Samsung also makes a lot of Android devices, making them an important part of the story.
I could never get a Samsung. I'm creative.
Dude, you're a barista.
And you can't have a mobile internet without the servers and infrastructure to do all the heavy lifting for the smartphones and tablets and even the personal computers of the time. As a result, cloud services like Amazon's AWS and Microsoft's Azure emerged. In 2010, Netflix switched to streaming only, and in 2011, Spotify came to the United States, and Microsoft launched cloud services like Office 365. More and more services were moving onto the cloud, which means they could be accessed from even smaller and less powerful devices. And as a result, the user experience got even better. All of a sudden, you weren't totally screwed when you lost your phone because your contacts and apps and photos got synced to the cloud. Then, on top of these chips and devices, are the software companies that we know and love. Facebook, Amazon, Apple, Microsoft, Google. You know, all the stocks you wish you bought in 2010 and held until today. I'm telling you that story because I think we'll look back at 2023 as the new 2010 with a brand new set of stocks that'll make huge moves over the rest of the decade. So, NVIDIA stock's recent explosion in price doesn't mean that you're too late. It actually marks the beginning of the next chapter. So, let's use the same pattern to look into the future and find some companies worth investing in. Let's start with semiconductors. While it's no doubt that NVIDIA will be a big winner for years to come, they're not the only semiconductor company in the AI space. For one thing, they don't make their own chips. TSMC, or the Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company, is a pure-play chip foundry that doesn't make any consumer products of their own. Instead, they support a wide variety of other chip designers without competing with them. For example, TSMC manufactures Apple's A-series chips for the iPhone and the M-series chips that go into Apple's desktops, MacBooks, and iPads. In fact, Apple accounted for around 20% of TSMC's overall revenues last year. TSMC has close to a 60% market share when it comes to making the world's chips, but that number is even crazier than it sounds because around 90% of all advanced chips in the world are made by TSMC as well. Not just for Apple, but for future versions of Tesla's full self-driving chips and, of course, NVIDIA's GPUs. Speaking of which, TSMC has a special 4nm process called 4N, which is customized specifically for NVIDIA's new Hopper GPUs. As it gets harder to make transistors smaller and smaller, I think we'll see many more specialized chip fabrication processes like TSMC's 4N. Some processes will focus on graphics chips, others will focus on optimizing CPUs, and maybe others will be better for flexible server chips or data-focused chips, and so on. The thing is, these specialized processes only really make economic sense in large volumes. So as new AI applications start requiring new chip designs and architectures, that should accrue to TSMC's benefit, because they're really one of the only companies that can make such specialized chips at scale. I think the stock market realizes this too, which is why TSM stock rocketed up almost in lockstep with NVIDIA's. And of course, we can't talk about TSMC without also talking about ASML. ASML is the only company on Earth that makes extreme ultraviolet lithography machines. These are the machines that TSMC needs to make things like NVIDIA's GPUs and Apple's chips. Each EUV machine has over 100,000 parts and needs dozens of trucks and multiple cargo planes to be transported. Around 90% of the parts in these machines are actually made by hundreds of companies from all over the world, with ASML acting as the systems integrator. And that's actually a good thing, since ASML doesn't need to be the best in the world at making every individual part and subsystem in these machines. many of which need insane amounts of engineering to be built to spec. For example, these EUV lithography machines have special mirrors made by a company called Zeiss. These are the flattest mirrors on Earth. They're said to be so flat that if Zeiss made a mirror the size of the United States, the biggest bump in the entire mirror would be the size of a speck of dust. It would actually be much riskier if ASML was responsible for making all of these complex components themselves and putting them all together, because if one part has an issue, the whole $200 million machine has an issue. Instead, they figured out a way to build up a massive network of exclusive deals with hundreds of very specialized suppliers. Because of this, experts say it could take decades and billions of dollars for any other company to challenge ASML's moat. And since ASML literally has a complete monopoly on these EUV lithography machines, the increase in chip demand from this new era of AI applications should benefit them as well. That's why their stock is also already on the rise. And speaking of stocks benefiting from AI, MooMoo is a Silicon Valley-based trading app built for advanced investors, and they have a ton of great features to help you find great investments and execute your strategies. For example, they have this awesome concepts feature that shows you which companies are involved with different advanced technologies. Check this out. You can search for ChatGPT on the markets page to get a list of every stock that benefits from generative AI. Apple, Microsoft, Google, NVIDIA, TSMC, ASML, and every company that I've been focusing on since OpenAI released ChatGPT to the public. No wonder they have almost 20 million investors around the world. And right now, MooMoo is giving away up to 15 free stocks, each valued at up to $2,000, plus a $100 cash bonus and a free share of C3AI when you use my link to sign up, and a share of Tesla or Google when you deposit $5,000. All you need to do is download the app using my link, keep your funds at that level for at least 60 days, and enjoy up to 17 free stocks. But this offer ends soon, so make sure to get started today. Alright, if we look 5 years into the future, semiconductors are only the first wave. The second wave would be the data centers and edge devices that rely on them. Let's tackle data centers first. We already know that NVIDIA dominates data center GPUs, and Intel has dominated the server CPU market for decades. But AMD has been slowly eroding Intel's data center market share. In fact, according to Counterpoint Analytics, Intel's market share is at an all-time low of 70% after repeated delays to their Sapphire Rapids chips. On the flip side, AMD hit a 20% market share in data centers at the end of 2022, up from around 12% just 1 year earlier. That's a whopping 60% market share increase in a single year, marking 15 consecutive quarters of growth in the data center market for AMD. One reason for this is that AMD's current server processors tend to be more power efficient than Intel's, which means lower overall costs for the data centers that run them. And AMD's EPYC line of server CPUs can have up to 128 cores in them, which means they still offer a lot of compute for the power. It's also worth noting that Amazon, Microsoft, and Google are all designing their own data center chips to reduce their reliance on third-party companies. But I think these homegrown chips will end up disrupting Intel more than AMD, thanks in part to AMD's acquisition of Xilinx. Xilinx is a huge player in field programmable gate arrays and reprogrammable chips. Reprogrammable logic is becoming more appealing for data center applications that need updates after a chip is made and installed, like for machine learning algorithms that get retrained and re-architected over time. For example, GPT-4, the large language model behind ChatGPT. Since FPGAs can be reconfigured via code, one FPGA can serve many different purposes inside a data center, removing the need for a wide variety of different application-specific chips. So, more flexible chips and chiplets could further increase AMD's market share for data center processors. Another reason I personally like AMD over Intel is because they have tons of optionality. Here's what I mean. Let's say that Amazon and Microsoft and Google do end up eating AMD's lunch on the data center side. AMD is also the dominant chip maker when it comes to video game consoles, providing the semi-custom chips for the PlayStation 5, as well as the Xbox Series S and X. They're also seeing growing demand in embedded systems. AMD provides the embedded chips behind the infotainment displays in the Tesla Model S and Model X, and soon the Model 3 and Y as well. So even if AMD does lose some of their market share in data centers, their chips could find their way into more kinds of devices, especially as these new generative AI tools drive up the need to do inference at the edge. And speaking of edge devices, the other company that I want to call out in this section is Apple. It turns out that many of Apple's products are category killers in the markets they compete in. For example, the Apple Watch is the #1 smartwatch in the US with around a 45% market share, and that number is getting close to 40% globally. Likewise, if you combine the AirPods and the Beats by Dr. Dre, Apple has about a 50% share of the US wearable headphone market. And of course, they just announced the Vision Pro mixed reality headset at their annual Worldwide Developers Conference, which I'm really excited to keep covering in future episodes. I think this next wave of AI applications will make all wearables 10 times more powerful than they are today. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised to see tons of incredible AI-powered apps for wearables over the next few years, which would basically be giving their wearers superpowers like speaking every language and seeing through buildings. What if Apple adds new sensors and an inference chip to the watch that lets you do things like ask ChatGPT questions about your surroundings or your health? Or what if Apple tweaks their AirPods to allow real-time translation between languages, or turns Siri into a virtual tour guide that can help you navigate your local surroundings? Or what if they add all of these capabilities and more into the Vision Pro? But the real thing to watch out for is how software and services are going to change over the next 5 years. Even though ChatGPT feels like it's taking over the world, it's important to remember that we've really just scratched the surface of what's possible with generative AI. ChatGPT and Microsoft's copilots are just the low-hanging fruit. Sure, they're going to help us use the most advanced features and get the most value out of the apps that we already use today, and that's awesome. But I imagine that the software of the future will actually come with new and exciting features altogether. For example, Apple also announced a huge new partnership with Unity Software for their mixed reality content. I've been covering Unity Software for years now because they have over a 50% market share for mobile content and over a 60% market share for augmented and virtual reality. There are already a ton of new generative AI tools for 3D assets and experiences. I can't imagine how this partnership is going to change how we create and consume all sorts of content over the next few years. And speaking of content creation, another example on the software side is Adobe. For example, Adobe Firefly is a family of generative AI models being baked directly into Adobe's Creative Suite. Unlike ChatGPT, Adobe's Firefly is a copilot designed to iterate through hundreds of variations of prompts and generated images. Now, by just selecting an area of an image and giving Firefly a few words, you can do everything from photo touch-ups to generating completely new parts of an image. You can do things like keep the subject but change the scene, keep the scene but change the subject, and pretty much anything else you can put your mind to. And that's just Photoshop. What about dynamically generating the music and sound effects for a video that you just shot on your phone? Or changing the lighting for an entire scene and having the light correctly interact with every object? Or how about generating an entire movie storyboard from nothing but a script? This isn't just AI helping us squeeze the most out of the software that we already use. It's adding a ton of new capabilities altogether. And I expect these kinds of things to increase Adobe's margins pretty substantially, because they're able to generate more assets to sell and more tools to use those assets while paying fewer people to make them. Likewise, stock photographers, videographers, and musicians will also need to learn to use these tools to produce better assets than what the AI can generate on the fly. I can't wait to see what kinds of new software, services, and experiences generative AI will enable, not just for computers and smartphones, but also new devices like smarter watches and headphones, as well as mixed reality. And I'm excited to share all of my research into that with you. So hopefully this episode helped you understand that the huge rise in tools like ChatGPT and NVIDIA's GPUs is really just the beginning, and there will be many more big winners in the years to come, not just in semiconductors, but in data centers and edge devices, cloud services, and all kinds of software and user experiences. But there's one more huge AI breakthrough that you need to know about, so make sure to check out this episode next. And if you feel I've earned it, consider hitting the like button and subscribing to the channel. That lets me know to put out more research like this. Either way, thanks for watching, and until next time, this is Ticker Symbol U. My name is Alex, reminding you that the best investment you can make is in you.